Now, there are some things that really irritate me, and today I'm going to talk about something that really gets under my skin and frustrates me. So welcome to this week's episode of the Asthma Spotlight podcast. Now, in the United Kingdom, we had a television series called Room 101, and more recently there is a radio program of the same name. And the idea is that the person who's invited to participate has to identify things that really irritate them. And then they try to persuade the people in the audience that this can be put into room 101, where it will disappear forever. So it's a way of really ensuring that something disappears. So why am I telling you all this? Well, there are some issues about asthma that are really upsetting me at the moment. In fact, the one I'm going to talk about today really irritates me. The issue I've got a problem with is about the term wheeze. Now, wheeze is the whistling noise that you hear when you breathe in when your air passages are tightened or obstructed during an asthma flare-up. So let me explain why I'm so irritated about the use of this term by medical colleagues, particularly those colleagues treating children. So what is it about wheeze? Wheeze, as I said, is the whistling noise you hear when your air passages get tightened or go into spasm. This is a symptom which usually happens in a number of different diseases that affect young children. And these diseases include asthma, lung infections, for example, like pneumonia or bronchitis or bronchiolitis, cystic fibrosis, and also in other diseases. So wheeze is really a symptom or a clinical sign that is associated with these diseases. Wheeze itself is not a disease, and it's definitely not a diagnosis of a disease. However, many children who are admitted to hospital with wheezing are not provided with a diagnosis of the underlying cause of the wheezing. So the general practitioner will get a hospital discharge report stating that the child was admitted for wheeze, or even viral wheeze, or acute viral wheeze, or wheezy bronchitis, or a number of other terms, including the word wheeze. So the implication from this discharge report is that this was a one-off acute illness and not requiring any follow-up or care and not requiring any classification in terms of diagnosis in the medical records. And even if someone has repeated episodes of wheezing, and even if this leads to hospital admission, many of these people, as I say, mainly children, are not given a diagnosis of the cause of their wheezing. And that's where the problem lies. So why does this irritate me? Because sadly, many of these people with recurrent wheeze may have asthma. And if it's not diagnosed, in other words, if the term asthma is not used, then it will not be treated properly. Now, one of the causes of wheezing is a virus infection. And of course, many of you will be aware that viral infections are also trigger factors that cause asthma attacks. And someone who has repeated hospital attendance and admissions with symptoms caused by viral infections should be fully investigated and a firm diagnosis should be made. To be clear, when I speak of repeated attendances, I'm talking about 2 or more episodes. Sadly, in a number of children who are admitted repeatedly who may have asthma, the discharge diagnosis of wheeze or viral wheeze or acute viral wheeze continues to be used on the discharge letter to the GP, and that's what the parents are usually told that the diagnosis is. So, as I said, this is a symptom and not a diagnosis of a disease. So the family or the general practitioner are not given a clear diagnosis when this child is discharged from hospital. And so the problem, of course, is that if a child who has repeated episodes of viral wheeze or acute viral wheeze, which results in admission to hospital, and if that child has asthma, they will not be provided with a diagnosis, they won't be treated appropriately with preventer medication, they won't be provided with a self-management plan which would help to alert them in the event of a future attack, when to call for help and what to do while waiting for help to arrive. This last point about self-management plans is really important. For example, in the National Review of Asthma Deaths, which I led, 45% of those people who died from asthma either did not call for or did not get any medical help when they were dying from their asthma. And that was not surprising, really, because most people who died from asthma that year, in fact over 70%, had not been given a self-management plan which would have helped them to know when and how to call for help during their final fatal asthma attacks. So when a child is admitted to hospital with symptoms of wheezing, it's not unreasonable for parents and the general practitioner to expect that a diagnosis of the underlying cause of the wheezing will be made by someone with appropriate experience. The cause or diagnosis should be told to the child and the family and should be included in a discharge letter to the child's family doctor. And it should also be recorded in the hospital record so that this is available for a doctor caring for the child on a subsequent visit. If a firm diagnosis cannot be made, which is sometimes the case, then the record should state that the child had been admitted with a symptom of wheeze which was of unknown cause. And of course, the other symptoms that the child had should be listed. And the record should list possible diagnoses, in other words, a so-called differential diagnosis to help future doctors seeing this child, and also to help the family doctor to understand that this is not an acute problem, it's a problem that might recur or might come back again. Similarly, parents need to know that if this happens again, they should tell the doctor who they're seeing that a diagnosis has not yet been made and that they would like a diagnosis to be made, please. And if the doctor caring for the child has not got the expertise to do so, then the parents would be within their rights to request that the child is seen by a respiratory specialist. So my major worry is that the term wheeze is not a clinical diagnosis, it's a symptom of an underlying disease, and in order to formulate a proper treatment plan, attempts should be made to make a clinical diagnosis of the underlying cause of the wheezing. Without a clear diagnosis of the cause of the wheeze symptom, the family will not know what to say to an ambulance call taker if they phone and the child is very ill the next time the attack flares up. Of course, without a diagnosis, the child cannot be treated appropriately when they arrive in hospital. The doctors would need to start right from the beginning again each time. In those children who are having episodes of wheezing caused by asthma, there are clearly lots of problems which put the child at risk. Not least when drugs are prescribed, there are some drugs which can aggravate asthma, and this needs to be something that should be on the child's record, so that when a prescription is issued in the future, the doctor knows what possible side effects the child could have. Another clear problem is that the child's school will not be informed that they've got asthma. So the school will not have a management plan for the child, and no one will know when to be concerned. And we've heard of too many cases of children who have died having had asthma attacks at school that were not taken seriously enough or where emergency help had not been sought. So no treatment will be available for emergencies in the school, and no one will know when to worry or to call the parents or to call emergency services if the child has a flare-up in the future. So, without a clear diagnosis, the family will not know what to do when the next episode develops. And without a clear diagnosis, it's unlikely that sufficient information will be provided on the danger signs that would alert parents to the fact that they need to call for help. And furthermore, in an emergency, parents might find it very difficult to get help from the emergency services if they don't have a clear diagnosis or they've not been told to explain what's going on with their child's breathing, and also to explain that the doctors that have been treating the child are not sure of the diagnosis, but they have mentioned that it's possibly asthma. So in summary, in my view, wheeze is not a disease. It's a symptom of an underlying disease. So the term wheeze should not be used as a final diagnosis after treating a child for an attack which involved wheezing. Virus infections are one of the causes of wheezing, and they are also trigger factors for asthma attacks. So if a child has 2 or more episodes of wheezing that result in hospital admission or emergency attendances at a doctor or at accident and emergency departments in 1 year, asthma should be considered as a possible diagnosis.